Hub Manager, Karen Oliver-Spry.
Hello, everyone. Oh, there we go. Let's go through the rest of the agenda. So, no, I don't need to be there. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to Sheffield. This is our second annual conference, as John has already alluded to, and I'm really pleased to say that this one's been a sellout, which is great for our egos. It's nice to see so many familiar faces in the room, though I know some of you may have only recently started to become familiar with us. But I know that we're all here because we care about the region and about realising the many benefits of getting to net zero. With buildings and the construction sector accounting for around 40% of CO2 emissions, coming together to share insights and learning is essential in addressing the challenge. And it's also really important to recognise that we're not alone in addressing that challenge either, because sometimes it can feel like we are. The Net Zero Hub exists to bolster local resources and capacity, but also to forge links across the region. So we're one of 5 local net zero hubs in England. We're funded and directed by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero as part of the local net zero programme. And our purpose is to accelerate and realise local energy net zero ambitions by building capacity with access to time and expertise, and also to provide a forum to aid understanding of local energy and net zero activity. The North Eastern Yorkshire Net Zero Hub is delivered through a partnership of combined authorities, and as I like to say, one combined authority in waiting, or rather one of those is one of the 6 partners. Each of our 6 partners has committed to ensure that the hub delivers and meets the objectives that are set out for it. And we really are a partnership. The hub has grown and evolved significantly since it started, and we now employ 20 people in the team in a variety of roles, and around half of these are employed for the hub by one of our partners rather than being based within the accountable body. We operate across a large region and recognise the value of local relationships. I know that some people in the room will have these objectives pretty much tattooed on their brains. It is a slide that gets wheeled out quite a lot when we're introducing the hub, but some of you might not be so familiar with our objectives. So for those of you that aren't, we exist to attract commercial investment into projects, to increase the number, quality and scale of local net zero projects being delivered, to develop and support net zero elements to wider programmes, improve information sharing, training and evaluation, and also to raise local awareness of opportunities for local net zero investment. Over the past few years, the hub has gone from strength to strength. These are just a few examples of what we've been up to. So through our local capacity support, John's already mentioned that we've been supporting over 100 projects. These include solar-powered ice rinks in the Tees Valley to trams powered by their own braking systems here in South Yorkshire. We've collaborated with 3CI and partners to deliver our first Regional Investors Forum in Leeds. We administered over £1 million of funding for community-led energy projects and helped organisations get started on their decarbonisation journey with free carbon literacy training. We've also worked with our partner hubs to deliver joint knowledge exchange webinars, including one on internal carbon pricing, where we were able to promote and share some work that we'd led in our region that was led particularly in the Hull and East Yorkshire area. It was a very popular webinar, gained a lot of interest and attracted 300 participants. But we're here to talk about building decarbonisation. So in terms of building decarbonisation, we've done lots of work. We've helped crematorium in Doncaster become largely self-sufficient in clean energy, and a community space in Massam become a demonstrator for sheep wool insulation. We've produced research setting out routes for addressing regional retrofit skills needs and piloted some initial interventions. We've subsidised professional energy audits to help community organisations get started on their decarbonisation journey, and overseen delivery of 6 innovative energy advice pilots, which have included various interventions reaching hard-to-reach communities, including ethnic minorities, traveller communities, and introducing some interesting techniques like training up community ambassadors. We've facilitated energy improvements in over 8,000 social and low-income homes through our regional retrofit programme delivery, and evaluated the experience of retrofit programmes to draw out learnings and recommendations that will inform future delivery. Oh, excuse me. But as a fast-paced and responsive delivery organisation, we're already looking ahead and planning more interventions. We'll be delivering more local capacity support for local net zero delivery, including supporting local energy pathways work, developing commercial investment models for solar, identifying demonstrator projects for unlocking geothermal energy at scale, and even embedding net zero in a new film studio production village. We'll be contributing to external programmes such as Northern Power Grid's pioneering community DSO by providing insights and input through their stakeholder advisory committee and the university-led Northern Net Zero Accelerator. We'll be unlocking more small local authority and community-led energy projects and working with partners to lead a bid for what could be the Hub's largest ever retrofit programme. And this is where I think we need some kind of dramatic music, and I feel the need to go, coming soon. So I'm pleased to be able to take this opportunity to let you know that we are in the process of mobilising 2 new programmes. The first of these is around heat zone implementation support. Our heat zoning lead will be one of 5 support officers funded by the department to be based within each of the local net zero hubs. They will provide an on-the-ground link between stakeholders and the heat zoning team within the department, and the role will promote local engagement with heat zoning policy and ensure there is a clear channel of communication for conveying local need and nuance to the department. I should note that this role should not be confused with the zoning coordinator function that will sit with local authorities, but it will help prepare for and support these functions. And we've also received funding from the department to mobilise a team to provide dedicated support to local authorities and other public sector organisations to help with decarbonising their own assets. This will build on our previous NAPED, North East Yorkshire Public Estate Decarbonisation Scheme, in which we worked with Turner and Townsend and Locogen to produce decarbonisation plans for over 70 public buildings. We also delivered training and upskilling activity to local authority officers and compiled a suite of legacy toolkit materials that can be freely accessed from the Hub's website. This team of 3, along with the heat zone implementation support, will be hosted by our partners at West Yorkshire Combined Authority, benefiting from access to local expertise in both areas. This is an example of the opportunities that can be created within our partnership, and we look forward to being able to introduce new team members to you soon. Final slide. So the Hub's values are strongly collaborative and partnership driven. Today you will see and hear about many examples of how these are applied to support our region. From insights gained from retrofit delivery to developing models for financing decarbonisation. From coordinating local heat networks to empowering communities to benefit from clean energy technologies. There are great things happening in our region, and it's important that we share and learn from them. I hope you find today's summit useful and insightful. Please take the opportunity to build links with colleagues from around the region and talk to the Hub team. Do also take a look at the annual reports that are on the tables. They're a good read, I promise. Enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you, Karen. And we're going to move straight on with the next item on the agenda, which is an overview of the new-ish now government's priorities in this area from Patrick Alcorn.
Thanks, John. Morning, all. Great to be here in Sheffield again. I think the last conference I did here was out at the advanced manufacturing site back in the day near Rotherham, which is a great example of how this region has powered past coal. And I use that example regularly for international colleagues around how renewables and advanced manufacturing can provide the jobs to replace those in the older industries. And I use that here to start with because I think I've been asked to talk about new government, and just transition is a phrase that many of you have used for a long, long time, but we haven't in government until very recently. And so that idea of the skills transition, the share of value, the opportunity for all that net zero brings is front and centre of what this government is trying to deliver. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Patrick Alcorn. I'm a long-time head of the local net zero demonstration and delivery programme in Desnes, which includes running the hubs. And we've been trying to do this for a very long time on a shoestring budget, so fingers crossed that the government's words and funds coincide at some point. Thanks to Karen and the team for setting this up. It's always good to come up to the hubs and see so many people, some very old friends and some who I've not yet met, so good to see you all here. Molly from our team, who leads for the North East and Yorkshire hub, is also here, so if you can't get hold of me, get hold of Molly. She's hiding in the back corner and tentatively waving just so you can't see her. But she is here to help as well, as listen to everything that's going on. As I say, budget seems to be the end of a process for most people, but actually it's the start of a process for us. We get an allocation, but we then have to go through a business planning round. So I can't stand here and tell you that the money given to Desnes is going to do A, B, C, and D, because that is not yet decided, and will be decided over the coming weeks and months at ministerial level and with the perm secretaries of the department. Clearly, the department did well relative to other departments, but a lot of that is in the very, very big things like CCUS. I think they've pledged 25 billion to that over the years, and in nuclear. So don't be fooled by the headlines. It is still a very tight spending round for the vast majority of the net zero world, as well as the rest of the government. GBE, so one of the big pledges in the manifesto was the setup of a Great British Energy, a public company that will be the national energy company. That's, they've had 4 months to set up a private company. They are, I think, on the 3rd reading in Parliament, so the actual legislation is going through. The chair has been appointed, Jürgen Meyer, formerly of Siemens, so he's in post and is contactable if anyone wants to discuss anything GBE. And in the budget, they were given 125 million, 25 million to set up and 100 million to start investing. Now, that doesn't sound a lot to all of those people who read the manifesto, but you have to remember that this sits alongside the National Wealth Fund. And so the UK Infrastructure Bank, as was, no longer exists. It is now the National Wealth Fund. It has had extra investment in it. It had already got 4 billion for local net zero priorities, and has been doing some work in this region on rapid transit and other large-scale infrastructure programs. So while there doesn't necessarily seem to be a lot of money in GBE, there is a lot of money in the National Wealth Fund, and that's to capitalise a lot of this. So you have to look at this as a big picture of lots of moving parts rather than just one little piece at a time. The jigsaw is quite complex. Alongside that, there are a number of other targets that this government has set itself. So in the local power plan, we have an interesting target of up to 8 gigawatts of locally owned, community-owned renewables. So that will be a challenge. We've also got the clean power target of 2030, so moving clean power forward to then. So there's lots going on in that space. On the ground, retrofit schemes have been re-announced, closing dates 1st of December, I think, early December, so talk to the team here if you need support in bidding. Heat network zones, 6 have been announced, sharing 5 million quid, including Sheffield and Leeds in the region. Local Net Zero Accelerator, including York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, looking at neighbourhood approaches and how you take a whole place to net zero rather than individual themes and thematic approaches. UKRI are also supporting a cohort of 50 places looking at place-based net zero and building on the smart local energy systems work that they've done, integrating heat, power and transport solutions rather than picking them off one at a time. And that includes demand management. Really big focus there on citizen engagement and citizen participation. So for those local authorities, for those organisations that want expertise in that, please look at net zero living. The hubs, Karen's talked very clearly about what's happened up here, but we've seen over the last 5 years a 10-to-1 leverage. So we've put 25 million into the hubs. And they've got over 250 million pounds of commercial investment alongside those projects. They've supported the community energy sector, and we have actually overspent on the 10 million that we were given for these 2 years on community energy. And the hubs, including especially the Northeast and the Northwest, have done a huge amount to build capability and capacity at the community level to enable communities to bid for that. And thanks to all of those here who are either part of community groups or working with community groups to do that. We also have a big knowledge transfer program, Net Zero Go, the APSI Energy Conference. We're actually doing awards this year for local authorities, so have a look at the APSI website, put your bids in for the work. Part of it is recognition, part of it is a really cheap way for me to get really good case studies to give to ministers as examples of what actually happens on the ground. And then we've also set up and are running about a dozen working groups with representatives from each region trying to unlock the barriers across planning, across infrastructure, transport. There's a whole range of different elements. Heat's one of them. So again, get involved in those. The final thing I'd say is that this is all about bottom-up approaches. This is about you taking responsibility, delivering and reaping the rewards of that delivery. Not everybody is in a position to do that, so it's about partnership, working together to unlock these, building scale, building appeal. The investors we're talking to are really interested in programs of 50 million plus, preferably 100 million plus ticket size. So it's got to be partnerships because we can't do that individually. We can't do that heat network by heat network. We can't do that retrofit scheme by retrofit scheme. We've got to blend this and we've got to build this together. So this is about proving out the value that you put in and what you can get out and trying to create new business models. And I'll just leave you with an example which I was talking about when I got here, which is in Copenhagen, they commercially compete all of their heat networks. And the community cooperatives win them every time because the social value element of public procurement drives an outcome that is different here. How do we start to get that community benefit, that local value? And way back in 2008, Oxfordshire did a mini Stern report that said that they were paying almost £1 billion in energy bills in Oxfordshire. 80% of that left the county, 50% of it left the country. How do you capture that value and put it back into your local economies? So don't forget about what MHCLG are doing with local growth plans, with local investment strategies, and the opportunity. All of the North East and Yorkshire is almost in a combined authority. Almost all of those have to do a local growth plan. Get net zero embedded in that, because it's not just about the net zero funds, it's about embedding it in everything you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. It's interesting you should mention decarbonisation programmes, because that's the next item on the agenda. You've moved here quicker than I was planning. I was going to stall for a bit. It's also Emma from Steer also. See, it's ready. I'm going to sort of stall for a bit. So a bit of housekeeping while we get ready. Our next speaker in position. You'll see there are some banners to stand the stage, one which I'm going to have to stop listing at some point. In the break, our project managers from around the regions are going to be positioned there, as you will have heard, and also our community energy team will also be there if you want to speak to those in particular. And that's 2 of our 3 primary delivery work streams, and the next one of those is domestic decarbonisation. So this is the part on the agenda where we're going to formally launch research from 5 years of delivery in this space, as well as launching the new programmes and projects that we will be putting that knowledge to use delivering. So I'm going to hand over now to Nicole and Emma.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I didn't bring my glasses, so apologies if I'm doing this because I can't actually see anything very clearly. But I'm Nicole Houston. I'm the Housing Retrofit Project Manager for the Hub, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about retrofit in our region and what we've been doing as a hub to support the retrofit agenda. So I'm sure most of you already know what retrofit is, but I think as it's become more and more complex over the last few years, it's good to take a pause and step back and think, what are we actually doing? And retrofit is simply the process of making changes to existing buildings so that their energy consumption and emissions are reduced. And that sounds really simple, doesn't it? But obviously, it's not that easy. I wish it was. So why do we need to retrofit? 80% of the homes that we will live in when we reach 2050 and that government target of net zero are already built. We're living in them now. It's something that we need to think about in terms of not always looking forward, but taking a pause and assessing what we have. We have some of the poorest quality homes in Europe and some of the highest levels of fuel poverty. But to tackle emissions that come from our domestic housing stock, we need to improve the fabric and move towards low-carbon heating where appropriate, but also prepare as a nation to change how we live and heat our homes. Before we move forward with retrofit, we need to assess where we are as a region and where we need to be. Currently, our local authorities and housing associations are reliant on stop-start government funding. We're seeing short-term retrofit plans, often limited by the constraints of the funding, for example, going to EPCC rather than beyond, only using certain measures and having very restrictive timeframes. We're seeing variable levels of quality in terms of installation, and this can be seen across the funded programs where compliance is quite strict, but very much so in the able-to-pay market where we don't have that protection. The costs remain high for certain measures such as EWI, and there is a lack of accessible, trusted sources to find out information, and we still don't have a single source of government-approved benchmarking for everybody to know what cost they should be paying for these measures. Retrofit needs to be accessible for all for us to make this what it needs to be, essentially. We need to be able to support those living in the coldest homes, those that are eligible for support, but those who are able to pay, and everyone in between. The cost of retrofitting your home needs to become mainstream. It needs to be seen the same as changing your kitchen, improving your living room, changing out your carpets, or switching out your car. But for now, it remains a burden and a cost homeowners and landlords don't necessarily want to face. To succeed in the improvement of retrofit services in the region, we need to increase demand, creating a sustainable, steady stream of retrofit activity to keep all those skills we've built busy. Too many bits here. So what do we need to consider? Skills. I think everybody will agree with that one. We need to consider upskilling our housing associations and our local authorities to protect jobs, retain the skills that people are learning through delivering these schemes, which are often lost due to the stop-start nature of funding and short-term contracts. We need the retrofit sector to be seen as an area for interest for careers advisors in schools, colleges, and in further education. And we need to empower and provide meaningful training to the workforce already in place. We need those one-man bands who are quite happy doing a plumbing job down the road to want to be involved in these larger scale programs. The supply chain, I think everybody knew this one was coming. But we not only need to support the growth of our supply chain, but we really need to work on keeping those skills within the region. What we're seeing is that there are many, many people, especially in Tees Valley, that are learning these skills and then taking them over to Manchester to employ them there. What we need to do is think about the people that we have and keeping the work local. And again, I appreciate that sounds easier than what it actually is. To do this, we need to ensure that we're looking at tenders and frameworks and how we apply to bring these installers on board. And what we're seeing from our housing associations and local authorities is that they really do want to start to break up these lots and keep it in-house as much as they can. But this can only happen with additional training to support those that need it. I touched on this earlier, but compliance is a massive issue with retrofit. I think we all remember a few years ago what happened when everybody had cavity wall insulation from the man in the van, and we don't want that to happen again. From the massive and very much appreciated influx of funding from the government, we have seen this sector grow really quickly. And what we need to do is to ensure that compliance is in the forefront. We are seeing more and more instances now being recorded of poor quality, non-compliant installation. And again, this is across government-funded schemes and in the able-to-pay market. And what we need to do is to make sure that the skills are there so that this doesn't happen. It can be simple errors, it can be the wrong tick box, or it can be that we have too many unqualified people working in this sector with not enough experience. Finance and funding, this is always the fun one, isn't it? I think we all know retrofit doesn't come cheap. We're starting to see some regions being considered for ring-fence retrofit funding through devolution deals, which will allow long-term planning for the region. It will help to develop the supply chain, and it will help with training and upskilling opportunities, and hopefully remove some of the barriers that we're seeing now to retrofit, such as the cost caps, specific measures, specific EPCs, and very tight timescales. We need to see better engagement between our housing stock owners, the DNOs, and the community to drive forward large-scale retrofit programs, but without excluding the able-to-pay and the private rented sector. And to really support these markets, we really need to think about engagement. So to drive forward engagement in the private rented sector and the able-to-pay market, we need to think about accessibility. We need to debunk the myths and the fears and share the importance and the necessity of retrofitting. The region needs safe routes, such as one-stop shops, which I know are being developed by some of our combined authorities as a place for people to get this resource. We need to target advice and support those considering improvement, and to get greater collaboration between local government and the community to make impactful change. So that's all sounded really negative, so I'm just going to briefly touch on what we've actually been doing. So these are some of the programs that the Hub has supported in the region. The region has been actively engaging with these programs, and the Hub are continuing to offer support to local authorities and community combined authorities should they want to bid for anything. These are some of the things that we've done. So the Hub has led consortiums for several of these programs. We're currently in the final 6 months of SHDF2, haven't gone grey yet, but we are working up our largest consortium bid for SHDF3, which will touch on, I think, around 16,000 homes, hopefully, and around £160 million worth of programme funding for the region if we're successful. It's really nice to see that people still want to work with us for 3 after 1 and 2. So this is something that we're really proud of as a hub. We have had the opportunity to work with the department to support delivery of our local energy advice demonstrator. The LEAD programme has been running for 18 months now and has so far provided advice and support to over 2,300 households. Each has received one-to-one in-person advice, and it has resulted in over 1,400 measures being installed to the cost of the resident who's received the advice. The programme continues until March 2025 and is targeting a variety of hard-to-reach and hard-to-treat groups, such as homes in conservation areas, the traveller community, and homes where English is a second language. And finally, you'll all be glad to hear, I think when we were thinking about the evaluation, we really appreciated the inside look we get as a hub of being able to be involved in so many different programmes. And what we saw was that whilst we're always striving forward, we needed to pause and take a step back and look at what we've actually done. So at the end of Lab 2 and during the delivery of SHDF1, the hub worked with Steer to conduct a year-long all-seasons evaluation of the supply chain, working with local authorities and the beneficiaries who'd received measures during these programmes to see how their experience was and what the difference has made, to actually see whether what we are striving for is helpful. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening to me, and Emma, who actually did the evaluation, will now tell you all about it. I'm not going to take any credit for it, but thank you.
So I'm Emma Haynes. I work for Steer. We are predominantly a transport consultancy, but I work in the economic development section, and I do evaluation, non-stop evaluation of all different types of policies. Amazing, thank you. And so, as Nicole says, we were commissioned by the Hub to do a pretty intensive evaluation, actually, of the retrofit activities. So that included LAD 1A, 1B, 2, 3, HUG 1, HUG 2. It was a full-year evaluation, and it was really looking to understand the experience of homeowners and occupiers, local authorities, and the supply chain. So we did a lot of field work. We spoke to 3 different groups, so we did 80 interviews, depth interviews, one-to-one interviews. You know, we spoke to householders on the phone. We actually also went into their homes as well. We did focus groups, and we also did a large-scale telephone survey. So we spoke to 415 households through that telephone survey. So we got a really detailed impression of what was going on the ground, and we also looked at it through time and also with seasonality. So we were able to see not just how people felt when they first had their measures installed, but how that changed over time, which told an interesting story. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the different experiences that we heard from local authorities, from the supply chain, and from the households themselves. So in terms of local authorities, we talked to them about the way they had procured their delivery partners. Most of them had used the same partner and the same installers for the whole programme. And generally, that found out, gave quite a lot of consistency, continuity, but there were issues. However, there was a feeling that it was too disruptive to try and, ditch a partner that wasn't working out well during delivery. So I guess there was a word of warning there in terms of making sure the partner was right from the beginning, because what local authorities told us was that it was too late to try and change things once the programme was in full flow. Local authorities differed in the level of sophistication that they could employ in terms of the data that they had access to. Some had really excellent data that allowed them to target the homes that were most in need of retrofitting. Others struggled to find that. But what we saw is when they worked together in consortiums or when they worked jointly with a hub, they were better able to access that data, and that made a really big difference to delivery. In terms of engaging with households, it was all about, so multiple different routes were tried. Lots of LA used traditional routes like mail outs, letters. Those were considered to be quite cost effective, but had limited impact because potentially there was an issue that they were experienced as spam by households. What worked really well was door knocking. So when people were able to engage with somebody on the doorstep, and especially if it was someone directly from the local authority who was knowledgeable, who was personable, that made a really big difference to actually being able to get to households and explain to them what it was all about. It was really important to be able to explain that it wasn't a scam, because households are naturally suspicious of free measures. It sounds too good to be true was something that we heard over and over again from households. They were really suspicious. Who is this person knocking at my door telling me I can have something for free, and can I trust them? So building legitimacy is really important, and the more that can be done at central government level, and then also coming down to the local authorities as well in terms of publicising schemes, making sure that people understand that they are legitimate and that they are worth households paying attention to, that makes a really big difference. We talked a bit about fraud and what was done to prevent fraud. In general, what we found in the research was that there was probably a bit too much emphasis, I guess flowing down from DESNES, on household fraud, so measures to avoid fraudulent applications from households, and not enough on supplier fraud. So we did find evidence of installations being signed off when proper checks hadn't been done or they weren't compliant, and there was not enough control to prevent that happening, and too much unnecessary emphasis, it was felt, on trying to stop households from fraudulently applying, because that just wasn't happening. I want to talk a bit now about the beneficiary experience. So in general, beneficiaries, they were really pleased to receive measures. They were glad that they were, and surprised at the value of measures that they were able to receive, and obviously made a big difference to bill savings in a time when energy bills were going up. And when there had been that engagement on the doorstep, that left a really positive impression, and they felt like they'd been through something valuable. Concerns came up when sometimes they didn't really understand why they had been targeted. They didn't really understand the rationale. Why have I been selected to receive these measures? And that caused confusion, and it also added to that sense of, is this too good to be true? Is this potentially fraud? Some had difficult experiences. Some of them waited a long time before they actually got their measures installed. That obviously can cause frustration. And for some people, it wasn't clear to them at the beginning that they weren't going to have to pay for their measures. So that's obviously something really important to emphasise from the beginning. And I'll just finish by saying, in terms of what made for a really positive experience for households, a lot of it is about communication, the interaction with the contractors, the attitude of the contractors. So where the contractors were polite, they were tidy, and where households felt informed about the process. They knew what was going to happen when, they knew who would be arriving, what they would be doing, the various different steps to expect. That made for a much more positive experience than a sort of sense of, I just didn't know who was going to turn up when. And the other thing is aftercare. So there did seem to be a bit of a gap from what we saw in terms of that sometimes they felt they were let down by, there was a lack of contact after the installation, especially when they had more complicated things installed, such as heat pumps. A lot of beneficiaries over time felt actually an issue came up, there was something which we needed help with, and we didn't know who to contact, or we didn't know how to deal with it. And so because there was not necessarily a sort of clear point of contact for them to go back to, that caused issues which people quite frequently cited during the research. So some kind of sort of holistic aftercare programme and a point of contact that beneficiaries can go to if they have any issues with their measures, that seems to be a really important thing to ensure that there's a sort of a sense of satisfaction that endures beyond just getting an installation that they're happy with. Okay, right, I've just given you a bit of a flavour. I'm sorry about the slides because there were more detail on the slides, but I think the key point I'd like to leave you with is that there's loads and loads of detail on the things that I mentioned just now, but lots of other things as well in the report, so I'd really encourage you to read it.
or at least, give it a quick skim so that you can read about all the different things we learn. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Emma. To say we will share these slides and all slides from today's event after the event, and also depending on Wi-Fi connectivity on the train, we'll be putting the research onto our website later today or first thing tomorrow. In terms of other bits of research, about 3 weeks ago, I say, in the city you're in today, if you're not familiar with it, there's a research centre called the South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre, which is a collaboration of several local universities that is researching on the various hardest to decarbonise aspects of the local economy. We became aware a couple of weeks ago that they'd done some research into household energy demand and I guess attitudes to retrofit measures. We thought to ourselves, that would be great to have on the agenda at our event. It's a shame that it's full. Yesterday at about 3 p.m. we had one of our speakers drop out, and I have to say Jane deserves a round of applause on her way to the stage, and I was for it for jumping in at very short notice and delivering this presentation now. So if you're ready to go, I'd like to hand over to Jane.
That is short notice. Hi everyone. So my name's Jane Carrick. So I don't think my slides are on there either. So in addition to me being asked to do this yesterday, I don't have slides to show you. So this is going to be interesting. Is somebody going to tell me that you're going to do the timing? Right, okay, cool. So see how this goes. I'm with the South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre. It's a research centre based at the University of Sheffield. But it's a partnership with Sheffield Hallam University, which is obviously where we are now, and also the Mayoral Combined Authority. We have, let me just have a look for this. So we've done a survey of people in the South Yorkshire region of domestic energy use. And the reason that we've done this is because domestic energy represents 29% to 39% of the total energy use in South Yorkshire. Simca's energy strategy aims to improve energy efficiency and sustainability in our built environment and encourage communities to be part of that transition. It's worth saying that Simca at the moment are updating their energy strategy. We've also done research on previous studies to understand the drivers for energy use. And it's obviously a really complicated picture. There's lots of drivers of energy use, but the most consistent and strongest driver is income. So what we wanted to do is run a survey across the region to understand whether this holds true in this region specifically, and also at this time, considering that we're sort of post-COVID, in the middle of cost of living crisis. And obviously there's higher awareness as well of environmental issues. Our energy use survey was administered by Ipsos. The fieldwork ran for 3 weeks in January and February this year, so it was done in winter. We surveyed 622 residents in South Yorkshire, and they were representative of the region in terms of age, gender and location. So what I'd like to show you is some snapshots from the survey report, but I can't, so I'm going to describe them to you. The survey report is actually being published as we speak. It's going to be on the South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre website. So if you Google South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre, I think the website address is sysustainabilitycentre.org. And there should be a link on the home page. It's really pretty. I'm really proud of this report, and I really wish I could show you. So I'll just describe it. Okay, so What I'm going to start with is just kind of describing the diversity of the participants. So we had a 42% were male, 58% female. There was a decent spread across ages. I think the 18 to 24 bracket were the least kind of represented, but everybody else was fairly well represented and fairly consistent. We had a good spread across the region. So 16% from Doncaster, 16% from Barnsley, 20% from Doncaster, 18% from Rotherham, and 46% from Sheffield. And the reason, obviously, Sheffield had more people is that there's more people live in this Sheffield. We had a pretty good spread in terms of education, so almost 50-50 in terms of graduates and non-graduates. Again, a few more working people than non-working people, 57% working, about 50-50 split between married and not married, and 35% of people said they had a disability. So that's just really to illustrate the diversity of the people that we had filling this out. Oh gosh. Right, okay. Again, I had a really pretty picture, but I can't show you it. We asked people about property types. So one of the themes in the South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre is residential and transport decarbonisation. And what we wanted this survey to do was feed not just into my project, my pet project about why does income drive energy use and what can we do to reduce that, but also feed into other areas of research, including the retrofit research. So we asked people about the properties that they lived in. So we've got some really nice information about property types, age, external wall material, and how many rooms people have in their home. And that's really to get a picture. You'll hear a little bit later that we're using that information to kind of get a picture of the correlations between size of home and energy use, or material of home, or type of home and energy use. We also asked to feed into that about their heating, people's heating habits, so how they use their heating. So we asked about temperature, the number of hours people use their heating, so the temperature of the thermostat, number of hours, how many rooms they heated, and what was the source of their heating. And that was, again, really to get a really good picture of people's heating habits and how people heated their home. So kind of one of the big takeaways from this report was about the connection between income and energy use. What we found was, indeed, in this region, it holds true that as people earn more, they use more energy. So we measured energy use by spending on energy bills. The median energy bill in this region, I think, was about £1,200 to £1,800 a year for across the income categories. But when you go up through the income categories, that kind of increases to the very top, which is over £100,000 a year income. Their medium energy use was £2,400 to about £4,000 a year. So we can see that holds true for this region. And that's not a surprise. We also asked people about how difficult they found it to pay their utility bills. So again, this was about engaging with some of our partners and other research going on, not just within the university, but also within the Mayoral Combined Authority. So and the associated councils in South Yorkshire. And those partners wanted to understand the spending habits and the heating habits, energy use habits of people at the other end of the scale, so lower incomes. So we asked people how difficult it had been to find the money to pay for their heating bills. And we found that a quarter of people found it extremely or somewhat difficult to pay their utility bills. And what we've done for one of our partners, I think it was the Mayoral Combined Authority, they asked us to try and drill down into, who finds it the most difficult, and particularly in respect of tenure. And we found that social renters were much more likely to have difficulty in paying their energy bills compared to such as people who own their own homes, for example. We asked people whether they were able to keep their home warm enough, and 20% of people said they were not able to keep their home warm enough. Again, there was a connection there with tenure. So private rented people in the private rental sector, 40% of them said that they were not able to keep their home warm enough. That was compared to about 26% of people in the social rental sector and 15% of people in who own their own homes. There was a high awareness among our respondents of energy consumption. So 76% of people said they often think about ways to save energy in their home, and most engaged in some sort of energy saving behaviour, such as wearing extra layers, etc. But interestingly, people overwhelmingly said that was to do with to reduce cost as opposed to environmental reasons. So it's all kind of circling back to that thing about, it's really, really to do with cost as opposed to environmental reasons in terms of drivers for energy use. So thinking about the kind of theme of this conference, retrofitting, we did ask people about energy efficiency features in their home. We asked people whether they had things like loft insulation, wall insulation, double glazing, etc. And people could say, yes, I do. No, I don't, but I'd like to. No, I don't, and I've got no interest, and I would not like to have this, and I don't know. Most people, sort of 75% of people, 3/4 of people had things like loft insulation, wall insulation, double glazing. Brilliant. Much less people obviously had things like heat pumps and solar panels. But what was really interesting to me was 57% of people said they didn't have a heat pump and would not want one. 46% of people said they didn't have solar panels and would not want them. So that's kind of an interesting thing to drill down to. So what we did was we looked at not wanting a heat pump, and we found that this increased with age and decreased with income. So it's possibly something to do with cost. People on lower incomes just think, I can't afford it, so I don't want it. But also something to do with age, like maybe being a little bit kind of nervous of the technology with age. I also looked at this question in regard to tenure. So interestingly, private rental people were a lot more likely to say they did not want a heat pump. And people in... Sorry, I'm just looking at this. People in flats and detached houses were most likely to say they did have a heat pump, which was interesting. And people in bungalows... maybe the old people, said they didn't want one. So that we sort of drilled down into some of the analysis like that. How am I doing for time? Oh, good. Okay, so I'm nearly finished. Just clicking back into what the previous speaker said about kind of like sort of trust and information and kind of the reliability of getting information, and also contractors, etc. We did ask people how much confidence they had in different sources of information on energy saving. The biggest, also the strongest, the highest rated source of confidence was, unsurprisingly, family and friends. So people, those kind of social networks were like a strong driver for people to get things like retrofitting and saving energy advice. Interestingly, Simca, so the mayoral combined authority, scored really low in this, and interestingly, 27% of people had not heard of the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. So what's next? So we're keen for these survey results to be used widely for the benefit of research and knowledge development. We've shared the data with colleagues working on the rollout of heat networks, mapping public and active travel infrastructure in areas of deprivation in Sheffield, and also models to inform retrofit planning across the region. If you're working on a project that you think could benefit from the survey results, please get in touch with the South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre or myself to discuss your ideas.